Good evening, everyone. I am CA Bhavin Bhupendra Kumar Rajguru, moderator of this webinar. We are delighted to welcome you all in webinar being organized by Continuous Professional Education Committee of ICI. It is my pleasure to be moderator of webinar on ISD vs cross-charge compliance under the GST and opportunity for CA under RTI. In short, why? We will start the webinar. First, I would like to precise you about the CP committee. The role of chartered account is involving continuously to accept never responsibility in the dynamic global environment. The future of CA professional depend on the being flexible upon the innovation. Therefore, the need of the or an innovate as per the requisite of the complement contemporary business environment and accordingly upgrade the curriculum and education system of chartered accountancy course. The committee also believe that member of ICI should look beyond the traditional area practice and seek and explore new area of business and profession. Hence, the CP committee is monitoring the members by providing guidance through the various workshops, seminar, nation conference, background materials, etc. Simultaneously, we encourage young and dynamic professional to grow the speaker, master of ceremony, and etc. CP program. The program for this evening is as follows. We have two sessions of 1 hour each. The topic are the input service distributor ISD vs cross charge mandatory compliance under GST. And second one, opportunity for CA under RTI. Our eminent speaker will talk about the mentioned two emerging area of professional interest. We have with us our chairman, Sir Purushottam Khandelwal, sir. He is the chairman of CPEC and convener of RBI Directorate of ICI. He is having 25 years post-qualification experience in the field of audit, direct and indirect taxation, and intellectual property rights. This year, he has devoted to fortifying the CP framework and guaranteeing the quality across its entire operation spectrum. And this year, major focus would be on the upgrading CP portal for enhancing of the branding and professional competency of the member. Please, sir. Few words, member, sir.
Good afternoon, respected faculty for this session, and my dear friend Yash Shah, chairman of the Bhavnagar branch of Gujarat, CA Bhavin Rajguru, secretary of the CP committee, Ajit Naji Tiwari, and respected member. It gives me pleasure to be amongst you on this Wednesday evening. The CP committee is a mother of all the committee. My committee is dedicated to organize various professional conferences, seminar, RRC, national conference to upgrade the knowledge of members. I'm always saying that what we are selling our services. So we have to remain updated any times. This year, Institute had done a lot of work. Last year, I was the vice chairman of committee for member in practice, where we had given software worth of rupees 20,000 to all members, those who are in the practice. This year, President is come with new committee, AI in ICI. The artificial intelligence is a very much important for members and students at large. So by use of this artificial intelligence, members can drop a appeal for income tax, GST, and a various question which is of the profile you can directly ask to SAP GPT. Suppose that you are drafting agenda for the first meeting of the newly incorporated company, you directly ask to the computer that I am a practicing chartered accountant and I want to draft agenda for the first meeting. So computer will provide all the information, all question, whatever question asked by your client to you, and you can directly ask to the computer, and Chat GPT will provide all the answers. So your life will be easy. You can invest your time with the any other purpose which give you the relaxation and your professional development. So this is a new tools as given by the institute to the members, and many others with the committee board member in practice. So today I will not take much of the, there is no range. Wish you all the best to success this program. Thank you, Bhavin bhai, for joining. Yes, bhai. I hand over charge to the Bhavin Rajguru.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, golden word, sir. I am now I'm giving a big profile of the today's our speaker, CA Yash Dipend by Shah. He has more than 4 years of experience in indirect tax and compliance function. He's also hold the diploma in international taxation and forensic audit and fraud detections. He has delivered multiple sessions on the topic of indirect taxes across the various platforms, and he has also written article on the various topic in the field of finance, tax, accounts, digital technology, forensic audit, etc. Over to you, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Let me begin by thanking Purushottam Bhai. He has been a CCM for Ahmedabad, which we area belong to. I am very proud to say the initiatives that Purushottam Bhai has taken has been well acknowledged by everybody around in the state and even outside the state in full country. I am very delighted and proud of you, sir, where you have been representing us in the council, and I'm thankful to you for the opportunity to give me for today's session. I'm thankful to even Bhavin Bhai for the kind words of introduction. Uh, let's start the session for today. I'll just start sharing my screen. So let us begin the session today. The topic for the day is ISD versus cross charge. To begin with, the session, just give me. I will just try to start the session with a quote which I have been putting it since the day when I started presenting on the field of indirect taxes. This is a quote which I usually take it in a lighter note, where I say there is something which GST has brought out, which has left us all women relieved. So now there is something other than woman which we don't understand, but we are still following. On a lighter note, let me begin the session for the day. Something which is very important. It is a breaking news for today in terms of indirect tax laws are concerned, wherein through interim budget 2024, which happened in February just before the results have come up for election, there was a provision which was put up in interim budget, the Finance Act 2024, where they had put up a provision saying making the input service distributor mechanism, which is derived under section 20 of the CGST Act, to make it mandatory. Now, the provisions under this GST Act was yet to be notified. Yesterday, late evening, we received a notification from the Department of Revenue saying that we are notifying the ISD mechanism, which is now mandatory from 1st of April 2025. Referring to the notifications, section 11 and section 12, which they are referring to, of the Interim Finance Act, speaks about provisions with respect to ISD. Now, talking in terms of ISD as a mechanism, we are all aware that there is a separate provisions wherein the distribution of credit, where there are multiple registrations in place on the same PAN, there is this distribution which has to be done. Till now, there were a lot of confusions around this point, wherein whether ISD is mandatory, it is compulsory for anybody to do, or it is an optional thing. There were a lot of things which were confusing in nature. To make a clear provisions, they have mandated this provision under the GST Act under section 20. We'll discuss in the further slide how is this ISD mechanism made mandatory. But to understand this ISD mechanism, we must acknowledge one thing. If that is something which is going to start from April 25, 1st April 25, we have to start the preparations right from today. Why I am saying so? Very important. The process to initiate, I will cover that action points also at the end, wherein what are all the action points which any multinational or multi-state operational entities should do to make sure we are compliant with the law. But this notification has mandated this provision. The process has to be started from 1st of April 2025, but the backend process which goes behind the activities should start right now. We should start planning the list of activities because there are a lot of action points which businesses and we as a consultants to that businesses should undertake so as to make sure that everything is in sync and in accordance with the provisions of the act. If I talk about a brief coverage for today's session, we'll try to understand the ISD provisions which are there right now. We'll also see the changes into that, the summary of these amendments, also the interplay between cross-charged and ISD. Also, there are some steps which I have suggested into the PPT where to implement that ISD mechanism in multinational organizations, what are the steps that we as a consultants should do? Also, some part of it, the return mechanism, what should be the process to do the returns compliances, and also some issues which are still not resolved even after it being notified into the provisions and also notification in place now. Now, what is the background behind this ISD? If I can just touch upon in small part of it, GST law, as you all understand, was initiated in 2017. It was a total changeover through our erstwhile regime where there were multiple laws, single law being placed for goods and services. ISD provisions were there, but it did not mandate anything. So you were at their option to do either ISD, which is the distribution of credit through one particular entity, or you can also adopt the cross charge. So cross charge as an option was available till now, but there was a need of clarity which arose, and through this 50th GST Council, they had made a recommendation saying that ISD is not yet mandatory. They had some discussion onto that. There was some clarity in terms of Circular 199, which came in 2023. And in the recently last to last GST Council meet, which is the 52nd GST Council meet, they mandated the provision for ISD. Recommendations were flown in to make the ISD mechanism mandatory. And through this Interim Finance Act, which we refer to the Finance Act 2024, they had made the changes in the law, making it mandation on the part of the GST and the taxpayers to follow this mechanism, which is a input service distributor mechanism. Now, let me go to little bit on the background of the ISD. It comes down through the definition of input service distributor, which is in terms of section 2 subsection 61. I'll just go by the previous definition which talked about what is input service distributor. It is an office of supplier of goods or services or both which has been receiving tax invoices. Specifically talked about input services, and it has also to issue a document for distributing the credit, Either it may be CSI or even UTGST, which has been paid, the tax has been paid, and both of them having the same PAN. So this was the earlier definition which was in place. Now there was a definition change which took place. So now what is the new definition which this ISD is putting up? Is it is an office which is remaining similar. What is office? It yet to be defined. It is nowhere defined. What could be termed as an office? Of supplier of goods or services or both, which receives tax invoices towards receipt of input services. Now this is important, including invoices in respect of services liable to tax under subsection 3 or subsection 4 of section 9. Now this is something which is very important because it covers even the CM transactions. Now section 9 subsection 3 and 4 talks about CM. So even with respect to RCM transactions, we have to follow this ISD mechanism, and we have to distribute those RCM activities also through this ISD route only. For now, I'll read the further. For or on behalf of distinct person. Now, this is very important, sir. What do you mean by behalf of distinct person? We are all aware distinct person has been defined under section 25, which talks about what is meant by distinct person having an establishment in other state on the same PAN, which would be regarded under section 25. But what would be that deeming fiction which we are discussing right now is in terms of what do we interpret for the terms for or on behalf of. When where we can say that it is or on behalf of somebody is something which is highly interpretational, highly disputable, which could lead to some litigation in future in terms of the interpretations of the word. But let me not stop there. We'll go ahead and read the further part referred to in section 25. And liable to distribute the input tax credit in respect of such invoices as in the manner provided in section 20. Now, second important thing which we have to understand is the liability to distribute should be there. Now, that liability would come out of the provisions which have been mentioned under section 20, which will be going in little bit in detail. I'll not spend much time on the before amendment part. We are all aware there was section 20 which guided these provisions for ISD, which talks about something where somebody has to distribute the credit, where there are multiple registrations. The words used were may distribute under the provisions. Now the words may itself was creating a lot of dispute, as in is it a mandation to distribute or it is just a recommendation or suggestion kind of thing where the words shall are not used. So they have completely revamped this, the full new section, which we will be going into greater detail in the coming slides. But important to note here is the earlier provisions had an anomaly where there was no mandation onto the part of this following the mechanism of IST. The attribution part also something which has to be attributed to particular set of persons, distinct persons, was also creating some issues onto this part. Let me straight away go to the further part. As we gone through the route of ISD, let me go down to the 50th GST Council, where they tried to recommend something saying ISD is not mandatory, which are procured from third parties in terms of internally generated persons, clarity in terms of a circular to be put in by the board. So there was this discussion onto this 50th GST Council. We'll go on to little bit of these two words because we have been discussing on to two important words. One is service procurements from third parties, and second important is the internally generated services. Now, this both the words have been nowhere defined under the act. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by internally generated services? Let us go into little bit of detail. What does that exactly mean in terms of our understanding? There is a service which is generated internally within the organization. So in terms of an activity or a transaction which is not taken by from outside, but which is said to be given by one set of persons sitting in one state to the same person sitting in the another state, where I have given some services to that person in another state which also belongs to me only. Now there were various questions which are being raised. Let me go into little bit of detail, because till now there was no mandation onto the ISD part whether anything done by the corporates in terms of not ISD or in terms of this, but it has done through cross charge. Also for third party, is it okay? Definitely in terms of the provisions, there was no mandation prior to that. Even the council recommendations say the ISD mechanism is a prospective step which is going to be implemented prospectively. Something which has to do with our one of the branch office to another branch office or a head office that I mentioned, it is in terms of internally generated services within India, whether cross charge is mandation, whether it has to compulsorily do for this internally generated, or even if I'm not doing it, I'm okay not doing that cross charge billing. In terms of this, even the relation in terms of related parties would come into picture, where I am giving the services to one of the related parties where it is entitled to full ITC, whether what mechanisms I have to go through is ISD versus cross charge. Rule 28 has valuation with respect to, has some rules with respect to valuation of that particular thing. Also, with respect to ITC not available to that related party, what are those mechanisms which were to be clarified through a circular? So this is the position prior to 199. Even 199 answered some of these questions which were in relation to this internally generated services. With respect to third party procure, where what do we mean by third party? Is I'm procuring services from somebody outside the organization, external agency, but in terms which has an impact on overall organization as a whole, whether it is a HO, whether it is a BO, which is a branch office, but the impact goes around the organization as a whole, not a state specific or GST registration specific. Even therein the question came out where I am eligible for a full ITC, where I am not eligible for the full ITC. Cross charge has been done, ISD has been done. What is the proportion at which what has to be done? There were some questions around this which were raised by the industry or trade at large. Now, if we talk about cross charge as a provisions, sir, please try to understand there is nothing called as cross charge under GST. There is no specific mention of words cross charge. But if we refer to section 7, section 9, which is a levy section, section 7, which talks about scope of supply, it relates to some part of the act which refers to schedule, wherein there are some activities which are treated to be in nature of supply even without consideration, where transactions are between related persons or distinct persons, but which are made in course or furtherance of my business. So I'm mandatorily required to generate an invoice, consider it as a supply, and even pay tax in terms of that activities are considered. So in this nature, what we are trying to understand is the scope of supply also includes, which is something as a cross charging, charging of cost to another person. The cost which I am not liable to bear fully, I will have to cross charge or bifurcate that cost to some other location or a GST registration, which is the actual bearer of that cost. We already had a Karnataka AL in case of Columbia Asia, which was in 2018 advance ruling, which upheld that in terms of, with respect to these provisions under law, where they are required to cross charge the employee cost used by one unit for the purpose or in relation to employment of another unit, either in branch office or in corporate office, whether there is a mandation onto the part of this cross charge provisions being applicable to. So we already had this great discussion. We are all aware about a secondment decision in case of Northern Operating, wherein also a similar discussion onto the part of this cross-charging of the secondment of employees was taken care of. Also, we had Cummins Limited, which is also a very widely related decision. But in terms of GST, what I wanted to bring to your notice is something of nature of cross charge, which has been a words which have been brought out by us, but which is not there under the provisions of the act. Now coming on to this 199 circular which I mentioned, it was out after the council recommendations, which brought out certain clarity as to two things which I mentioned. First, in terms of third party. Second, in terms of my internally generated services. So what was the proposition which came out through this circular is, with respect to third party, the ITC distribution would be at the option of that person who is the procurer. Either he wants to do cross charge or even follow the ISD mechanism. So there was no mandation onto the part of that procurer to mandatorily cross charge or even distribute that credit. It was left at the option for this particular set of services which is procured from third party. If you are following the concept of ISD, you have to get yourself registered with the GST with a separate GST number. Mandatorily, the credit should flow to that GST and the distribution and every other compliances would follow. If you are doing a cross charge, it is little bit on a less compliance basis, where you are left at the option of just creating an invoice. The invoice that you receive from a third party, you will create a similar invoice to other locations where the cost is to be allocated. So it was left at the option where you are eligible for the full ITC, where you are not eligible for the full ITC in terms of employee cost, or otherwise in terms of the services that we are given, or even in terms of not eligible. There were certain propositions which were brought out by this circular. In terms of internally generated services, sir, please try to understand there are two very important things which were brought out. Now, as I tried to explain you in terms of what is internally generated services, which is not taken from or procured from outside, but which is generated and provided to other branches of the same organization. Now, in terms of the transaction between this distinct person, which would be guided through Rule 28, as I mentioned, because in terms of related parties, the rule will come into picture along with Section 15. What it clarified was, in terms where the other person is available with the full ITC, whatever is the invoice value would be treated as the value of supply. Even if you do zero invoicing, that would be considered to be a legitimate transaction. But very importantly, friends, in terms where the full credit is not available, the valuation would happen as per the valuation rules, excluding the employee cost, so that that portion does not create an issue, because there were earlier decisions which had created some issue onto this employee cost part, which anyways is covered under schedule 3, not considered to be a supply. Now what do we take away from this circular? There is an option which has been given in terms of third party to do ISD or cross charge. It does not mandate following the ISD mechanism. Even in terms of the invoices that we raised in terms of ITC eligibility, available transaction to be considered revenue neutral and hence credit should flow. Even in case of with nil value, that would be considered to be the right valuation mechanism which has been adopted. Now, we are here at this moment where we are discussing onto the part of new provisions which are in place now. Definition we already saw, section 2 subclause 61, which talked about ISD as a mechanism which is mandating. Coming on to this new law, new section 20, which has been now effective, which has been now made effective from 1st of April 2025. As we discussed into the earlier part, the words used were may distribute. Now this proposed new section is using the words shall be required to be registered as ISD. Now there is a mandation onto the part of law to compel to register your business in case you are having a multiple state of operations, distinct persons. You are mandated to be required to register yourself and also distribute the credit in terms of that through ISD mechanism. The provisions are in place so as to make sure the effective implementation. We'll read it along with Rule 39 to give it a little clarity. So this is the current scenario which I discussed just few minutes back in terms of third party, whether to go through ISD route or cross charge. The option was available in current scenario. Going forward, sorry, in terms of internally generated, I missed, it is cross charge, where internally generated services I would be able to do it through cross charge. The option was available. Going forward, sir, this is very important. The recommendations of council was to make ISD as a mandation activity, a mechanism which is to be done even for activities for RCM transaction. But it has restricted to a particular level if we read the provisions for only third party procurements. Even in case of internally generated services, cross charge would follow, and there is a no restriction which is apparent for cross charge to be done for that particular set of services. But yes, for third party invoicing and the RCM transactions, that would be specifically be required to be done through ISD route only. In terms of input services is concerned, we are adopting the fact of this with respect to inputs or capital goods. What is to be done is still a query which has been left open. But yes, current policy which we generally follow is the nature of stock transfer will be continuing in further periods as well. So this is a brief summary of what we discussed, that is before amendment and after amendment. This is with respect to the interim budget which brought out these provisions in terms of following the mechanism. So third party ISD or cross charge, after amendment compulsory ISD, RCM, there was an option to do either through cross charge. HO has to pay RCM, and distribution of that common services in nature has to be done through cross charge, or following the ISD route, RCM to be paid by the state in which the ISD is having a mechanism, and following that the distribution would take place. 17.5 ineligible ITC. Now there is some dispute around this, which I will take up at a later part of my discussion today, wherein in terms of ineligible ITC, how is the distribution going to take place in terms of ISD or cross charge? Because in terms of cross charge, it would be disallowed at the first end only. The distribution to further branches would not take place. But in case of ISD, the availment would happen at ISD, even though it is an ineligible, the separation would go, the separate for eligible, ineligible will go, and ineligible credit would be reversed in the hands of recipient, which will be discussed at a further part of it. Employee cost remaining the same, even the circular clarified no need to cross charge that cost, which is considered to be an internally generated. Input capital goods we already discussed, not applicable the provisions of ISD. But whether the question still remains whether a cross charge is something which is required, because the words used are only internally generated services. The cross charge, the charging of cost to different parties is something which is still disputable. Related party, the or distinct party, the input which are being placed in terms of this option at the first end, now ISD mechanism to be done. Mandate ISD for distinct person mandated. For related party, a cross charge would still follow the route of that. Now, this is the mechanism which has been provided in Rule 13.9, wherein what is the mechanism to be transferred in terms of IGST credit is concerned, either eligible or ineligible. Wherever there is an IGST credit which I want to transfer, wherein I am eligible for that credit, I will be distributing the credit in terms of IGST at any level, whether it is ISD state at the first stage or another location which is the same state in which the ISD is registered. Say for example, Maharashtra is the state where I have my ISD registration. There is another office which is also in the state of Maharashtra. I have a separate registration for both. I will have to credit it in terms of IGST only. And another example where I have an operations in Gujarat as a branch office, still that would be treated as a IGST credit only. In terms of CGST, the claim would be CGST in terms of the same state. Even for same branch, it would be CGST. But very important to notice this third leg, where the CGST credit would be distributed in form of a IGST credit to other state, which in our example would be the Gujarat state. Similar provision for S as well, which is in place, which is going to be there as a part of distribution mechanism. Coming to the part of manner of recovery, section 21 specifically says wherever a distribution has been happened but which has been considered as wrong by the authorities, the recipient would be the person who will be liable to recovery. It would be recovered along with interest. Where there is a excess distribution or wrongful distribution, even a circular is there in place dated 26th October, wherein a general penalty would be applicable along with the interest have to mandatorily be recovered from the recipient, which is an important. If I give a little bit summary of this, I'll just, because this is already something which we have discussed in terms of third party and internally generated. Just I have made a bifurcation in terms of FCM and RCM transactions. I will not go into further details. FCM transactions existing process to cover the cross charge, including the value of goods and the taxes. What has to be followed transferring of only the GST component. Also, it would be through ISD route, wherein a separate registration and compliance with respect to that registrations would follow. RCM, wherein the transactions are common in nature, availed by multiple states or multiple persons situated at multiple locations. Option for cross charge was there. Now mandating it specifically availment at the first and at head office, and then payment of that tax also at the state. Nevertheless, there is no mechanism which has been prescribed till now, wherein how can an ISD pay the amount and also avail the credit, because it is the purpose of ISD is just to have it in terms of a distribution is nature. Nevertheless, the distribution would take place after the RCM is. In terms of ineligible ITC, current process, as I mentioned, not to be cross-charged because that is immediately reversed at the first stage only. But in terms of ISD, we will have to avail the ineligible credit as well at the ISD level, and has to be further distributed to other persons where there is an effect. RCM also similar in nature, not cross-charged, but in terms of this distribution under ISD, mandating it to be done. In terms of document, currently there is no specification. We'll have to do it through section 31, where there is a description of things that has to be mentioned on a tax invoice. Further, in terms of ISD, there has to be separate invoices for eligible and ineligible, which will be required to be prepared and also been provided to IGS. We were doing in terms of cross charge wherever it was required and also reporting through monthly returns. But under this new mechanism, wherein internally generated services, there is already a circular in which says where there is a full eligibility, even a nil value will be considered to be a rightful distribution of my cost. If there is another expense which will be required to be cross-charged in nature of the incurrence in other states, it is specific agreement should be in place. Better to have an agreement between the states and the head office, so as to make sure there is no issues onto the distribution part or the allocation part, which can create a problem at a later stage. Now we are coming, till now we discussed onto the provisions. Now let me just go down to little bit onto the practical aspects of what all things or what all expenses are generally covered under the ambit of ISD or cross charge. If we say in nature of statutory tax audit or internal audit services, whatever the organization takes, it is from a third party, which I mentioned, it is a external party billing to us. ISD, yes, as mentioned, specifically for third parties, the distribution, if wants to happen, it has to be mandatorily through ISD only. Specific registration and cross charge to be done. In terms of legal service consultancy, similar in nature, ISD, yes, cross charge. Director seating fees, which comes out as in terms of that nature wherein a self invoice is required to be created in terms of RCM. Similar to that, very important in terms of employee cost or HR cost or admin services. In terms of that, salary is something which has been exceptioned out of the ambit of GST, and hence that is not required. But whatever is the common nature of service in terms of HR or admin could be done in terms of cross charge as well, because it is a internally generated services which is not billed by somebody else, but it is generated from within the organization. Bank charges, yes, external billing to happen to us, ISD mechanism mandatory. Capital goods, now this is something which is, as I mentioned, not covered by the ISD mechanism specifically outside the ambit, because cross charge would still apply if they want to avail the option of cross charging. Advertising or marketing or business promotion could be said, could not be said. There are multiple views onto this aspect, because there is a specific impact on particular state or business where the advertisement goes on to. But yes, disputable still, there could be a possibility of analyzing the transaction which change as per the facts of the case. Ineligible ITC, which is procured from outside 17.5, ISD to be applied mandatorily, availment to be done, and further distribution. After distribution, the recipient to reverse the credit. Very important to my mind is the last point, which is the head office rent. Say, for example, my head office is in Maharashtra. Now, the rent which is paid to that, whether it could be said that the rent paid to head office has some impact onto other state, because the decisions that take place, the management meetings that take place usually happens at a head office. So whether even this cost would fall under ISD mechanism or we will have to follow the cross charge still remains a point of dispute. Now this is something which I said is an action point. Let me spend just 10-15 minutes. We are left with 15 minutes more. Let me try to summarize this ISD as a concept. What all things are coming up in terms of the provisions which have been made now mandatory in terms of the Finance Act. Firstly, foremostly, the plan should be wherever there are multiple state registrations, a separate registration in terms of ISD would be required. New registration would require to be taken in RG 01, and a specific mention of ISD is to be done. Along with that, you will have to separately create all the GLs, because now routing would not directly happen as a cross charge, but to route through a different entity which is registered under GST. So different output and input ISD ledgers would be required to be created, and at the end of the month it should get nullified. Whatever you are availing, you should be distributing the same amount. Excess amount should not be done. Second and very important, bifurcation between eligible and ineligible to be made separately, as there has to be a separate mechanism for both the things. Eligible has to be separately distributed, ineligible has also to be separately distributed. In terms of services which are common in nature, we'll have to identify that vendors, inform that vendors in terms of this mechanism in place, and try to adopt the provision to say to them that this new mechanism has been in place and a separate registration has been sought by the organization, wherein a separate GST number under ISD has been procured by that particular entity, and the vendor is to be communicated. So the new bills which has to be allocated has to be routed through this ISD number only. Along with that, as I told you, there are multiple compliances which will be followed. which is a monthly return which will be required to be furnished in form GST R6 along with your existing returns. RCM transaction, as I told you, there is no mechanism at the very moment where the payment of tax under RCM and the availment would take place. How it will happen under ISD would be still a question which is required to be answered. Training, this is something which is a must, wherein an employees who are getting impacted through this would require a specific training to be given, because in terms of compliance, that is a major roadblock, and any non-compliance would yield to a lot of penalty, and also consequences could follow in terms of demand is concerned. I believe in terms of ISD implementation, it is more of a IT project, because there is lot of changes which is required in terms of system is concerned. Along with that, there are also compliances which will follow, which will be required to be done. What are the steps we could look at for implementation of this ISD? First and foremost is the identification of the expenses that we mentioned at the very first moment, where we said bifurcation of the cost which is external or internal, or eligible or ineligible. We'll have to go each by each step, deriving at the trial balance level, accounting level, and allocating that the list of whatever the common expenses is there, bifurcating it between third party vendor and other. In terms of third party, wherever there is a possibility of getting a separate invoice that for separate branches, it is better to have it through that mechanism, because it will not be routed through this ISD, and specific invoicing to that branch itself would suffice the purpose. Even if after that separation still there remains something which is required to be bifurcated, then probably identification of that would take place, and bifurcation of that into eligible and ineligible would be required to be done. Second step, the locations, because attribution would be of very much importance. As I mentioned under section 21, the recovery could be initiated where the recipient is receiving that ISD credits. So locations, the attribution to that locations, the nature of common expense that will go out to which location would be very important. If in terms to that particular thing, if it goes to only one specific location, it should not be billed to any other location. But if it is going for more than one, say there are some specific invoices which are given to ISD, the head office, but it goes to only one unit or one state. However, in cases where there are more than one state, the allocation should happen as per the appropriate attribution rules provided. Communication to the vendors in terms of this new ISD number, the registration to be followed, and booking of invoices in the system in this ISD registration would be very relevant. And the last and very important is the training part, where if we train the employees correctly, the availment part and the distribution part would be very relevant and would be the important factor which would be considered. I'll skip this part because this is a monthly return. The flow, how the ISD return would flow, the reconciliations you would have to maintain regularly in terms of whatever is coming in and whatever we are distributing, nullifying the effect. If there is anything which is left, there should be a specific reason or reconciliation in place which would suffice the purpose of this. And this is required similar to our 2A, 3B, a specific form which is GST 6A is in place, which has its own challenges, but nevertheless will have to reconcile those invoices with GSTR 6A. Reconciliation to be in place, eligible, ineligible, we all discussed this part. Filing of return would happen only after you reconcile all of this, following this step-by-step approach. Now, let me spend just 5 minutes onto this. There are a lot of issues which are still remaining unresolved. There are a lot of issues which needs answer. Wherein I'll just try to summarize some point, or I am just putting a thought onto it. Maybe or may not be requiring an answer, but yes, something which require a discussion on. To RCM already discussed in terms of the payment mechanism. 16(2) form GST or 6A, the reconciliation, there is nothing called 6B, because this form was similar to our 2A 2B. There is only a 6A, which is a dynamic form which gets on changing. So whatever difficulty we faced for 2A, same difficulty would be facing for 6A. So there is no mechanism in terms of law wherein there is a static form in place. Now there is one important understanding in places where there is the words used under the provisions are the distribution to happen to that entity which are operational during the year. Now, in during that year also, there might be some situation where for some part they might be operational, for some part they might not be operational. Still, the distribution could take place. Yes, no. Time of supply in terms of IGS, because they have not mentioned anything onto the cross charge part, which the internally generated services in terms of full ITC or no ITC, no specific provisions for time of supply. Something onto the part of billing, centralized billing or decentralized billing, whether the applicability of this IGS would take place as per my accounting policy. I am following a decentralized or centralized mechanism, whether that would have some impact onto that also. If we go to some particular set of expenses wherein there is a common expenses in terms of events or hotel accommodations or rental services which are taking place at this office which is situated at a head office, whether that nature of expenses which require to be distributed or common expenses which can be allocatable or attributable to that or not, still remains an open question. Whether there would be change in valuation of IGS cross charge where the third party is already distributing through ISD, because as I mentioned, now after this amendment, what would be the fate of this circular 199? Because till that comment, there were bifurcation as to the ISD route or cross charge. Now, once this comes into picture, the mandation onto this ISD part, how would that be done? It would be another question. Attributably based on distribution, because the attribution rules which defines is in terms of a turnover. Now there would be certain expenses which I think so there would be not much relevance as to turnover, but has to some specific criteria. So whether that attribution to that criteria or distribution to that criteria is also something which will be tested. Distribution for exempt supply like interest on loan or something would still be remain. Ineligible credits, as I discussed, rule 39, it has mentioned specifically to be distributed separately for eligible and ineligible. Distribution, whether it is required monthly or quarterly into the same month which I have received, I have to compulsorily distribute. That is something which is still required to be answered. Now coming on to one very important discussion where recipient is involved into full exempt supplies, whether the distribution could flow to that unit also where the attribution rules say so, or in case where HO is also supplying some specific exempt supply, rule 42 along with this would take place. E-invoicing, something around that also. FAQ has answered that e-invoicing for ISD is not mandatory. Jurisdiction, some small things which I have tried to cover. I will not try to go into much detail because I think so we have already completed the allocated time. some discussion on to rule 42, 43, even for this 180-day payment, how would this reversal credit note would function in case of section 34, reduction of amount after the distribution. Rule 39 says something about that SEZ as a location, because there would be a lot of working capital blockage in terms of SEZ. So this is something which requires a broad discussion, but I will try to end my session over a quote which is an end quote to me, is ideally wherever a government is trying to collect the taxes, it should collect like a honeybee which sucks the right amount of honey so that both can survive. So honeybee is something like they will also suck the honey, and also that would still be there for their future perspective. So I believe this is something which will still need clarity onto this. But yes, as per the provisions of the law, ISD is now started from 1st of April 2025, but it would require a lot of efforts at the back end to make sure there is a effective implementation of the ISD is concerned, wherein we are not following the non-compliance route. I will end my session here and I will hand over to Bhavin Bhai, who has been the moderator. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for your patient listening. Bhavin Bhai, if there are any questions or if we can take one or two questions, probably if the time permits, we can do. Else, we can wind up the session. As I can see, Nipun Bhai is already there, and probably I do not want to miss his session to be started.
Sir, two, three questions are there, so I can. Khushbu Gupta ji says that if what will happen if one group company provides shared service to its unit as well as subsidiary and associate company.
So in this case where there is a group can be involved into the expense bifurcation between its subsidiary, wherein if I am assuming it to be a distinct person, because the criteria for distribution under ISD is a distinct person. If it is a distinct person, yes, it would fall under the ISD route, and you will have to implement the ISD route mandatorily from 1st of April 2025.
And how will one vendor invoice in such a case be billed as an ISD to unit as well as cross charge to subsidiary and associates, sir?
So in this case, as I mentioned, specifically the invoicing would have to be redoed, because in terms of there are two different set of numbers which are in place. So ISD number is something very specific. So the vendor has to bill the invoicing to my ISD number, and from that ISD number I will be able to distribute to further set of subsidiaries or query which are distinct in nature.
Another question is, sir, Umesh Kumar Mantri ji, if we will pay salary of any employee, can do cross charge to other branch on the basis of sales or any other ratio?
So that is where I mentioned Umesh ji in terms of the turnover definition, because it specifically the attribution rule says there has to be a specific attribution in terms of what criteria you adopt. But in terms of my view, it would be very disputable, and even other than turnover or sales, there could be some mechanism which could be done in terms of the provisions of law.
And one of the question, other Yash Parikh ji, whether depreciation of fixed asset of HO need to be cross charged.
That is where I try to put up something onto this, the capital goods part, where there is no mandation onto the ISD route. The cross charge option would be at your option to adopt, because that is something which has nothing to do with ISD. But cross charge as an option, definitely, where you have an allocation to that, where you can prove that that capital goods has some effect onto that other location or has some impact which we can draw out of for other location, we can definitely allocate cost, but through the cross charge.
Thank you, sir. I feel privileged and honored to propose vote of thanks on this our chartered accountant meeting. A special acknowledgement to our speaker, CA Yash Shah sir, whose presentation has enriched our knowledge and provide valuable perspective on the latest development in our field. Your expertise has been invaluable. I would like to thank all participants and attendants too for their participate in this discussion today. All word of appreciation goes to the organization committee and support staff their meticulous planning and flawless execution, ensuring that everything runs smoothly. We have also with us our Vice Chairman, Sir Gran Chandra Mishra ji. I have given a brief CA Gran Chandra Mishra ji is Vice Chairman of CP Committee and Chairman of Committee on Insolvency and Bankruptcy of ICI. Presently, he is serving the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India as a Central Council member, and he has more than 24 years of professional standing to his credit as an established chartered accountant. Under his vision, this year CPE committee taking new initiative for the member. Over to you, sir. Few words for members, sir.
Thank you, Babinji. Very respected two speakers, Nipun Bhai and Yes Bhai, and of course, Secretary of the Committee, Ajit Ji, and all respected participants. Good evening to one and all. Friends, as we understand that on every Wednesday, the committee conducts 2 hours knowledge session, and that too on some newer and novel areas. And today, both the speakers are delivering on very important topics that is also with related to the opportunity for the chartered accountants under RTI and GST. Nipun Bhai, one of the well-known face for the fraternity, shall be deliberating on very important topic that is RTI, and just we have heard Yes Bhai. Friends, the dynamics of the profession are changing very fast, and we have to look for the newer areas for practice in coming time. And so, CPE committee is uh, taking the initiative to come up with the programs which could be beneficial for the practice of the members at large. I'm sure that these sessions are not only increasing the skill set and knowledge base, but also paving the path of practice of the chartered accountants in better manner. Keep connected to CPE committee, and please, if anyone is willing to be a speaker or moderator or wants to contribute as a resource person to the committee, kindly do write to the secretariat, and I'll request Ajit ji to kindly take due care of the members whosoever want to become any type of resource person for the committee. I'll not take much time as our learned speaker Nipun Bhai is here and he is smiling and waiting for his turn. So we'll request Bhavin Bhai to kindly start the session of Nipun Bhai. I am thankful to Yes for your kind deliberation. I joined you at the last moment. It was really wonderful. Thank you one and all for patient listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll give a brief profile of Advocate CA Nipun Sangvi, sir. He has a extensive expertise in the corporate, commercial, and insolvency law and hold the PhD in insolvency law from the Washington University. His research paper has been selected by IIM Ahmedabad and IBBI, published in Anshu's done 2022 on a sale of company under the liquidation as going concern. He has delivered more than 1,600 sessions on a corporate commercial law across the various platforms. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bhavinji. And thank you, Mishra ji, for inviting me every now and then. Also, Purushottam Bhai, who actually requested me for the session. my very good friend Yash Bhai. I have been listening to your lecture too, and nice to see you, Bhavin Bhai from Bhavnagar. So I'm very happy to be part of this new venture where new topics are being taken. And I think Ajit ji, you should try and take more new such topics which are of more interest nowadays to chartered accountants because they are sooner or later coming out of the traditional areas of practice. And one such area which I suggested and readily taken up was RTI. In fact, Bhavin Bhai just introduced me as a lawyer, but I would just like to share with you all that I have been an RTI activist for almost 16 years now and have filed RTI almost more than 1,000 RTIs I have been filing over these decades. The first RTI I filed was when I was doing my law, and I had got less marks in company law, where I had already qualified the chartered accountancy course. So I thought that how I can get less marks in company law, and I filed an RTI and also filed for re-examination of my paper re-evaluation. And fortunately, I got good marks, and it was a error in the marking. So that's how the I used to get connected to RTI law, and I got interest in the RTI Act. And sooner after getting into this I would say activism or practice or assisting people in filing I also got into filing of various public interest litigations based on the information which we seek under RTI. And today I am going to deliberate and discuss not only on the RTI law, but also how it can be used by a chartered accountant during his practice for his clients. In fact, I would say, is the most cheapest and the most strongest weapon today which we have. It's one of the beautiful legislations provided to us, and this has helped unearth various, I would say, corruption, also brought in transparency in various transactions, procedures of government or semi-governmental organization, even big scams, which we have been hearing from all the way long for many years now, have been unearthed by an RTI. And RTI hardly takes, and as we will progress in the RTI session, I will tell you that it hardly takes a 10 rupee to file an RTI. And today, because of the facility given by the central government, we can file RTI by sitting in our offices. Online filing is there. Each and every central government owned organization is now connected to the portal of central governmentally owned portal of RTI, by which we can file RTI and we can get the response. In fact, we can also get a tracking of our RTI request from time to time. The specific public information officer is also tagged in that request, and we can always get an update with phone number and email ID available of that PIO. So that's a very good thing. In fact, I will also, if time permits, take you to the RTI portal and how we can file an RTI. So I'll just start with the brief background of what the RTI was, and then soon I will come on to the various cases which have happened and by which we can get an understanding how we can use an RTI. Let's say, for an instance, can we file an RTI on behalf of our client? Can we get an income tax refund by filing an RTI? Can a wife file an RTI to get the income tax return of husband? All these things we will be discussing in the case studies. See, RTI Act first came in 2005 by virtue of a central law. But before that, various states had enacted RTI in some form or the other for governmental organization. Like freedom to information was there in Maharashtra. Similarly, there was an agitation in the state of Rajasthan where it actually came up. Azadi Bachao Andolan was one of the NGO which had initiated this RTI movement. So I'll just touch upon the historical background, how it started. So it basically started by one Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which was there and trying to find out that the money which has to go to laborer, let's say 100 rupees was to go to laborer, it was only 5 rupees or 10 rupees which was being going in their hand. Otherwise, all the amount was being distributed illegally by some of the corrupt officials. And this led to the campaign by this particular NGO. And soon many NGOs came together. Government also helped in forming this legislature by appointing some senior lawyers. They were also assisted by the local Panchayati Raj institutions, and there how it came into form the RTI Act. So basically, RTI was a born out or a baby of the, I would say, struggle which happened in the state of Rajasthan, which was to unearth the corruption and the opaqueness which was already there going on in Panchayati Raj institution. It started from there, and then obviously in various state, various agitations were also there, and copied or inspired by this Rajasthan movement, it started as a central law. I'll not give more time to how it came into force and all, but I will pinpointedly come because, in the interest of time, it is better to go on the case study. What is the basic purpose of RTI? So I will just clarify some of the issues. So one is that there should be a complete transparency of the procedure being followed by the government department. So let me tell you that once we apply for, let's say, a registration, now many of you may be applying for GST registration. Some of you may be applying for RERA registration, or for that matter, registration before any governmental authority. Whether the process is transparent or not, where is my file going on? Let's say my file has to move from one table to another table. Let's say there are 10 tables. To locate the file movement of a table, I can file an RTI and the status has to be given to me. That is the concept of RTI, that there should be a transparency. Can I ask under RTI or can I seek the information? Who is responsible person for doing this work? Sometimes we don't know who the person is responsible for a particular work. If we are going in a governmental organization, whom to meet, we can very well file an RTI. This particular law has established two information commissions. One is at the state level, one is at the central level. So if we are aggrieved by any state government organization who are not providing us the requisite information, we can file an appeal before the State Information Commission, and similarly before CIC, that is the Central Information Commission. I will also explain how the appeals work, how can we go to High Court or Supreme Court, but the basic context of RTI is these four pillars. Now, what is an information is something which is very important to understand. When can we apply for RTI? So RTI basically is a request that I require some information. Now, what information I require? So recently, in fact, it's 2 or 3 months back, one of the chartered accountant came to me and asked me, "Sir, this particular cooperative bank, I don't remember, it was a district cooperative or a state cooperative, is not providing me with the details. What would be my fee?" They are saying that this fee has to be decided by us. By us means the bank's board, the local bank board. So whether it is correct in law or not, I don't know, but I have accepted the appointment, but I am still not clear on the fee part. So whether under RTI, can I seek the information that what would be the fee of the statutory auditor? Yes. So now who is the controlling authority of this cooperative? I asked him. He said probably it is the NABARD. So I said, okay, then you move an RTI before NABARD. So I suggested him to move RTI before NABARD. Please provide me the relevant information with regard to any circular, notification, guideline relating to statutory auditors' fee. Now see, what I'm asking, is there any circular or is there any guideline or is there any directions, whatever it is. So because RBI, they have master directions also, they have circulars also. Similarly, sometimes they use the internal power to issue a circular to clarify something to their member banks. So I don't know what it is. So this all things are included in the information. So information is a very wide word. It includes documents, opinions, advice, press releases, circulars, orders, logbooks, contracts, reports. All these are part of information. So I can seek any information. You would also see there is a word called sample. Can I seek a sample? So suppose I am going on a road and I think that this road is not proper or this is damaged or I think it's of a substandard material. Can under RTI I seek a sample of the road? Answer is yes. We as citizen can seek the sample of the road. And I have quoted a judgment of CIC, Central Information Commission, wherein it has been upheld that the sample of the road being provided to us, of course, there is a percentage of the road, which is the road which is made, how much percentage can be permitted to be taken as sample, but it's around 10%. And we would require a small sample to get it tested in a laboratory. So as an informed citizen, I can request under RTI to provide me the sample. In this particular case, it was asked by one Mr. Deepak Yadav from Public Works Department, which was denied and therefore he went in appeal and therefore this order. So if I pay the requisite amount, I should be provided with the sample. I can get it tested and then appropriate legal recourse can be taken. That's altogether a different story. But the point is whether a sample can be provided under RTI, answer is yes. Sample is an information. So this particular type of information, which could be, let's say, if something is available in the public domain, let's say the act is there, let's say the rule is there. So it is there in public domain. So under RTI, will it be an information? No, it's available in the public domain. It is available for dissemination to the public. Then it is not something which under RTI I will ask, or whether it will be covered under information under RTI. Answer is no. Suppose if even then, if you ask for it, normally the reply will be you will get it on so and so link. And nowadays they are saying you please go on the website, you please go on so and so link, and you can access this particular document or information which you are asking. Now, whether under RTI, can I ask, can I say, let's say you all understand what is a double AR, Advanced Authority of Ruling, that this particular thing should be added, subtracted, or maybe computed like this, or it is taxable, or it is exempt. So can I frame an RTI in a sense to obtain an advice or maybe a legal opinion from the department? Answer is no. You can't do it. It's not an information. A particular legal view taken by a department cannot be sought through an RTI. So if you are asking that this particular is my facts of the case, whether this is taxable, answer is no, you cannot get it. Then similar case went to Supreme Court with regard to EVM information. So court denied, saying that EVM information is not a information under RTI and it cannot be made publicized. However, VVPAT is a public information that can be sought, that is there in the RPA Act, Representations of People Act. Now let me come on to a specific example which would be interest for all of you. Whether, let's say I am holding, I have taken a loan from State Bank of India, and let's say I have defaulted, and now I would like to understand their settlement policy, compromise policy, or one-time settlement policy. Can I get it? So if it is a government organization, we can very well get it under RTI. So whether, let's say, sometimes we face a situation where some client comes to us and says, sir, I had given an OTS proposal, but the bank rejected it. Now, what is the reasons for rejection? They do not provide. How can I get it? So I can get it under RTI. Can I get the copy of the file movement under RTI? Answer is yes. I can very well ask, what is the status? What is the status of my OTS letter? Who is the appropriate authority? So you have to word it like your RTI as, please provide me the information of the concerned person who is authorized to consider one-time settlement in the account number so and so. This is how you will have to draft your RTI. Your RTI cannot be interrogative. You cannot put questions to the authority. Why, what, when? But you will have to phrase it in a manner that there is an information which you are requesting. And that information should be available. If the information has to be created, then the public authority shall deny it. Similarly, let's say some of the institutions which are private, but I need to get the documentation, whether it is correct or not. So let's say there was, like recently, there was a fire in an amusement park. Whether that amusement park was built on a legal land or not. So an RTA was filed which revealed that that particular amusement park was illegally operating on a residential property. Similarly, let's say there is a private limited company. I would like to, in the private limited company, I would like to ask about a particular board, let's say minutes of the meeting. Can I get it? Answer is no, I cannot get it. But if they have filed something with the ROC, can I get it? Yes, it is a public document if it is with the governmental authority. So section 74, specifically subsection 3 of the Evidence Act talks about a public document. So if a document is filed with a government organization, it can be retrieved under RTI and it's a good evidence. You can produce it before any court of law. So indirectly, you can get an authorized document from a government or authority or an organization pertaining to a private party. So this is how the RTA law is structured. Various cases, which out of my own experience, that we filed an RTA during Corona, that the government hospitals, private hospitals are not disclosing the number of beds which are available. Remdesivir, how many injections, vials are available. So all these things were then under RTA we sorted. Under RTA, they are compelled to give it. And suppose that private organization does not give it, you move to the regulator of that private organization. So let's say CMHO was the appropriate authority under which hospitals are there. And after getting the data, we came to know that some of the eligible patients were denied entry. And thereafter, the matter went to High Court, and then the High Court directed them to put it on LED boards outside the hospital. And that's how RTI shapes the law. Sometimes the information which we seek under RTI becomes the basis of filing probably a PIL or a writ petition in the High Court. And sometimes it also forces the executive and the legislature to take steps to curb the wrongdoings. So there have been many RTAs, even people use it for political agendas also to find out, let's say, how much expenditure so and so public this party has incurred. All those RTI has used, misused for all these. But now important for us is this definition of public authority. So basically, where can we file an RTI? So we can file an RTI before a public authority. Now, what is a public authority? So in simple words, a governmental organization is a public authority. An office or an organization established under constitution or particular law of parliament or maybe law of state legislature. Chief Justice Office, Chief Justice of India's office is also under RTI. So even the judiciary is under RTI. Whether Chief Minister office is under RTI, yes. Whether PMO is under RTI, yes. So RTI is by and large applicable to all, or it covers into its ambit all. I would say government, semi-government, executive, legislature, judicial bodies, all this broadly they are covered. Though in judicial bodies, it is not fully covering them. Like you cannot question a judge's decision under RTI. What are the reasons for providing this judgment? You can't question it like this under RTI. Now, this particular clause D is very interesting under RTI, where it talks about suppose government funds a particular organization. Let's say there is a private school, but it is partially funded by government. Yes, then the details would be available under. If government controls it, so sometimes government can fund an organization, sometimes government will control. Like some organization, government will have a control. Like some organization which let's say have license from defense ministry, they have a controlling person, ex officio person from the ministry sitting on the board of the company. Now in such an organization which is controlled by the government, then like government of a state controlling a PSU, they say that whoever is the secretary of let's say mining of the state ministry would by default be a managing director of this PSU, in which let's say government is holding 50%, government is holding 30%. There are public-private partnerships also. So wherever government is there, it is controlling, it is financing, or a mix of two. They all are covered under RTI. So I have given you this example of college and school. If it is aided by the government, it is covered. So this example which I was talking about, where by virtue of the articles of association, so let's say in this particular company, GVFL is the name of the company. So I'm talking about the judgment of Gujarat High Court, wherein the State Information Commissioner said that you have to give a detail. Now this was challenged by the PSU. Now the Gujarat High Court held that it is not a government company per se if the stake of government is not there, maybe more than 50%. So it was, I think, 20% or so. But article of association says that managing director of a government-owned company will ex officio be there in this also. So by default, if the managing director is there, by default, if the secretary to a particular ministry is there, if they are coming and sitting on the board, it means that government is having a control. It could be not owned, but it could be controlled. It could be constitution wise, it could be controlling wise, or it could be funding wise. Any which ways, if an organization is covered, then it has to give information under RTI. These particular organizations are not covered under RTI. Now, here you see most of you would think about income tax. So I'm giving you example of serial number 16. DGIT investigation is not covered under RTI. Enforcement Directorate is not covered under RTI. Director of Revenue Intelligence DRI is not covered under RTI. So if something confidential, something which is appear in this second schedule of the RTI Act, they are not bound to give you information even if they are government organizations. So this is very important. Now, what is right under this act? So we can always inspect a file. So most of the people are not aware. They always say that under RTI, give me a copy of this. So you can always say that I want to inspect this particular file. You can always take down notes. Obviously, you can take the certified copy of the papers which are there. Certified samples, I've already given you an example. Nowadays, pen drives are also allowed. Previously, it was floppy disk and CD. All this can be used to copy some particular document so that we can make a legitimate use of it. It could be for legal purposes, it could be for filing a case, anything like this. Now, if the RTI has to be replied within a period of 30 days. So if I apply for the RTI and the receipt of the RTI by the PIO, so every government department will have a person called PIO, that is Public Information Officer, who would be responsible to reply to the RTI request. Now, this RTI request, which is made has to be replied within 30 days. If it does not concern that particular department, it has to be transferred to a particular department within 7 days. That is the timeline which is given. If it is not replied within 30 days or replied beyond 30 days, then they have to refund the fee. Practically speaking, I have never seen this refund because normally it's a so meager amount. 10 rupees is the RTI fee. Nobody normally asks for it, but yes, as per law, you can ask for a refund. Secondly, under RTI, some of the states, because RTI gives the power to the state to also fix the fee. So some of the states, so let's say to the best of my knowledge, Gujarat state, it has increased this fee from 10 rupees to 20 rupees. So for filing an RTI in central government owned organization or PSU, I have to pay 10 rupees. But for Gujarat state, if I want to file it for Gujarat government organization or Gujarat PSU, it has to be 20 rupees. So this is again dependent on the state laws. They can create their own rules to increase the fee also. It's a very normal amount. For per page, you have to pay so much. For bigger page, you have to pay so much. For inspection, first 30 minutes free of cost. After 30 minutes, it's so and so. So all those things can be done. Now, what is important from the drafting point of view of an RTI? So if we are filing an RTI, the most important thing which I have seen missing in my experiences, section 7 first proviso is not used. What does this say? This says that the information which I am seeking relates to my life and liberty. It is that much urgent. So I gave you an example of I want to know remdesivir vials because it was an essential drug for COVID. I want to know hospital. So this is a particular hospital. I want to know how many beds are vacant. So this is an information which is required, which is pertaining to my life and liberty. In that case, this 30 days time period is shot down to 48 hours. So the information has to be provided within 48 hours. That is very, very important. If within 30 days you do not get a reply, then it can be deemed that it is refused. You have to move an appeal before the first appellate authority. Now, who is the first appellate authority? So, suppose I have filed an RTA and SBI. So, SBI PIO is the first authority where which I have filed my application. Now, I am aggrieved. So, I will have to move in first appellate authority in SBI. So, it's an institutional appellate mechanism. Now, after that, if I want to challenge, then I will have to move to CIC, Central Information Commission. So I have to move an appeal before CIC. If I am not getting data from SBI, then I will have to move to CIC. So government organization. So for that matter, SBI, RBI, SEBI, all those authorities, CIC is the authority. And thereafter, I will come up to just appeal in a moment. So some of the informations which cannot be disclosed. So let's say a defense strategy cannot be disclosed. Something which is prohibited by law, like decisions given by the courts, you cannot ask the reasons for them. Some parliamentary privileges are there. If a particular policy is made, what is the reason for making that policy? Sometimes that cannot be disclosed. Some trade secrets cannot be disclosed. Under RTA, you cannot ask for formula of a particular medicine if it is confidential. So all those things are there. Now, the first appeal I have told you is before the first appellate authority. But the second appeal is before SIC, that is State Information Commission, in cases where it is a state government owned organization. In case of central government organization, it is CIC. It can be filed within 90 days. So first appeal in 30 days, second appeal in 90 days. So this is the timeline. But suppose I am not satisfied, then what will I have to do? I have to move to, let's say, against the State Information Commission order. I need to move, then I will have to move to High Court. If I want to move to High Court, under what provisions of sections of the RTI? So as such, there is no provision under the RTI. So I'll have to use my constitutional remedy under writ jurisdiction to move to High Court and appropriately before Supreme Court if I am not satisfied with the order of CIC. If a person, if the PIO does not give you the information within 30 days, then a maximum penalty of 25,000 can be imposed on that PIO, and that has to be borne from his own salary. It will not be a cost to the department. It will be cost to the respective PIO. Therefore, RTI is very important and a serious issue. Every governmental organization has created a specific department of RTI and a specific person per PIO so that this particular information is given on time. Now, whether I can get income tax refund by filing an RTI. So see, it is like I can always ask, please provide me the status of income tax refund of PAN number so and so with respect to assessment year so and so. This is the way you can draft your RTI. You cannot write like this, why is my income tax refund not being released or processed, whatever. You can't do it. But you can do it like this. You can draft it by asking the status. So you are asking the information with regard to status. Can the RTI be filed by a chartered accountant? For your own case, you can file it, but I cannot file for my clients. So RTI is a right which is available to a citizen of India. So an individual has a right. So that individual will have to file an RTI. You can assist your client for filing RTI, but you cannot replace yourself in place of your client. Now, can I take, because nowadays everybody has a camera mobile. So can I take a photograph of the information or file I am seeking inspection under RTI? So I can always take a screenshot, and I have given you a good order because most of the I would say RTI departments which I have seen in-house, they are not aware. They always tell you to apply for certified copy, deposit the amount, and then give you the documents. Sometimes it consumes much more time in getting those certified copies. It is better to get a click of the photographs of the file which you are inspecting. Now, interesting case of Girish Ramchandra Deshpande, a very famous case, which went to Supreme Court. Can the income tax returns of a particular individual be considered as information under RTI and provided to any other person? So Supreme Court held that it cannot be provided to every person. So today I cannot get the ITR copy of probably maybe Mr. Ambani. I cannot get it. Now, this particular issue, whether I can get it or not, let us say if I am a relative, so a wife files for RTI to get the copy of income tax return, can it be provided? Or let's say to ask for GST return of the husband, can it be done? So answer is yes. Now CCI, CIC, I'm sorry, CIC has ordered in Rahat Bano case that income tax return can be provided to the wife of the husband. So Girish Deshpande was a judgment which was of third party requesting ITRs under RTI Act. In this case, wife is asking for copy of returns and it has been provided and confirmed by the CIC. Similarly is the case of Sunita Virmani, wherein GST return was asked of her husband and it was provided. Now, what is the reason for providing it? So wife has a right to get the detail of the husband, probably to file a maintenance case under maybe they are planning for getting a divorce. Something like this could be there. Now, these are the judgments which have recently come. Can a brother get a copy of income tax return of another brother or maybe sisters? Or can a father or a son get copy of the return of either of them? So father getting copy of the son's ITR or a brother getting it or maybe a sister. So all these are still untouched areas. But my personal opinion is that if they have allowed wife the copy of the return of the husband because of their relationship, probably similar judgments could come on this line by drawing the same analogy. This is going to probably help them in some of the other litigations in which they are involved. But yes, it will never be provided to a third party. Some of the case studies I have just jotted down from my own experience. So let's say in the COVID period, we had filed RTI because they were not permitting us to appear online, or there were measures not taken with regard to Honorable Apex Court. With regard to that, you need to keep sanitizer, distance, something like this. So we had filed various RTIs. And once the RTI is filed, they have to give a reply which can be used against them in the court of law. So what happens immediately is they comply with all the directions which you are asking, and then they reply that yes, it is complied. So that's how I just quoted some of my cases here. Now, some people also ask me that, sir, we had applied for registration. It is taking 90 days now, no registration, no response. So you can always file an RTI. How many registrations were given in this month? How many of applied this month? How many of this disposed this month were applied on which date? So you can get a data, and then you can definitely go to court and say, see, they are doing everybody's work, not my work. So all this information can be used by you in litigation with regard to RTI. You can use the data. It's up to you. How do you demonstrate? Similarly to just like in ChatGPT, how command you give and what is the output. Similarly, you can use this particular area also. Now let us see that CCTV recording is made mandatory in Paramveer Singh judgment. So it's a judgment by the Honorable Apex Court, 4 years old judgment. Now it says that wherever there is an interrogation, so let's say it is interrogation by police, by ED, by GST, by income tax, anywhere where you are called for interrogation, it should be recorded. Like in case of police station, it should be recorded visibly. It should be visible. Audio video recording should be there, preserved for at least 18 months. There should be a system for preserving it. All the area where the person can move, entry area, sitting area. In case of a police station, it could be a barricade area, jail area. Wherever the persons are visible, the recording should be there of CCTV. If they are interrogating me, they are not physically abusing me, then probably I can ask for the video recording. That yes, if there is an allegation like this and it has been used in multiple cases, I can give you good citations of this, wherein the people were used and physical coercion was applied. So under RTA, if you ask them to provide me the CCTV recording, it is the duty to provide of the head of that particular department. So they cannot play whatever XYZ agency. I would not say the agency per se, but some of the officers or some of the employees, they try to misuse their power. This can be curtailed by filing an appropriate RTI. And the system is not there, there is a direct violation of this particular judgment, and which is contemptuous, directly a contempt petition could be filed. So nowadays, if you are aware of your rights, nobody can play with the rights available under the Constitution. Another important case is, and it's a very interesting case, I'll just connect with this judgment. In the case where one Captain Subodh Kumar filed an RTI and got the details, what is the dues from Air India? And based on the dues, which were more than 1 lakh at that point of time, he filed a case before NCLT. Insolvency petition was filed. Now, once the Air India has confirmed that these are the dues and it is undisputedly above the threshold limit, they cannot make any defense in the court of law because then it's an admitted due and they have to pay, otherwise the company would have gone to insolvency. So that's how it was settled. So my point is that if your dues are being shown in the books of accounts of the company, you can very well use this RTI if it's a government company. One chartered accountant approached me, sir, we had done audit for a particular government department. They are not paying us, but I'm sure that they have provided for our audit fee in the books. So I said, how many years have passed? So he said some 4.5 years have passed. I said, legally it is difficult because after 3 years, any civil claim becomes time barred. But still, if you are having this apprehension that there must be something in the books, let us file an RTI. He filed an RTI, and the best what happened was the government official called him and said, "You please come and collect your money." Rather than replying under RTI why the fee was withheld, they immediately called up and said, "You please come and collect your check." Sometimes RTI gives you a good push to, smoothen your bottlenecks which otherwise were there. Now, this is again an RTA which I had filed. You see, whenever a listed company does a non-compliance, the stock exchanges, SEBI penalizes them. But when I went through some of the, Navratnas, Maharatnas, Mini Ratnas, I could find that most of them did not have independent directors. I filed an RTI and found out how many years this company has been doing non-compliant and whether there was any penalty imposed by the stock exchange. And to my surprise, I found that you can see the table. So many years, so many companies have not complied with the independent director clause of the listing agreement. And you can see on the screen this much around 6 crore and odd amount was the penalty which was imposed on these PSUs. So you see, on one hand, the government itself makes the law. On the other hand, the government departments are non-compliant. So it's not that only we see the non-compliance, but it is also there rampant in the governmental organizations also. So this is how, and again, I don't know whether it was because of this or not. There were various appointments which were being done. Once this data was there, it was also covered heavily in various newspapers and all when this RTI information was there. So it led to various appointments. This was the context of the RTI I was talking about. You can just read my drafting because PPT would be shared after the session. Now, again, an important aspect, whether, so there are two things. Once an account becomes a defaulter or an NPA, what is being done is banks declare that account as a willful defaulter. And sometimes in cases where there is a siphoning, they also declare that account as fraud. Now, whether I am declared as a willful defaulter or not, or I am declared as a fraud or not, there is no public area where I could find it out. So I'm talking about 5 years back. So I moved an RTI. Obviously, it was for some due diligence which we were doing it. We filed an RTI, and for the first time, so SBI first authority, PIO, rejected it. But at the first appellate authority, it was reversed and the details were provided. And after that, all the banks, so we had used this particular order in all the banks, and now all the banks have created a list of all the willful defaulters and fraud and now kept it on the website. So it is my right to know whether my name is there in the willful defaulter or fraud list or not. Also, even otherwise, the list of fraud and willful defaulter should be kept on the website of the bank so that anybody who knows that this particular person had did some fraud with the bank, others do not get into business with that particular person. So even otherwise, this was important. But again, this is a case study where we had filed an RTA. Now, suppose if the PIO gives an evasive reply. Sometimes he says, I do not have the documents. Sometimes he says, your documents are not available. Sometimes he says that your documents are old. You do not have a right to access them. Sometimes they say it is destroyed. So if the PIO gives an evasive reply or PIO does not give the information, then courts have come down heavily and imposed penalty on such persons. So I have just quoted some of the cases. Then suppose there is an FIR. Now, this has become a little bit old case because now almost all the states have made a police website where every FIR is being uploaded. But this is very important that FIR copy is a public document and should be made available under RTA. So if suppose I am not a party to an FIR, but I want to know about that FIR, I can apply under RTI. Please provide me the copy of that FIR. Though most of the states which I have seen, maybe Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, I have seen Delhi, that RTIs are now, FIRs are now put on the public domain on the website only, and you can track it by name and number. But otherwise, you can get the copy of FIR under RTI. FIR is a public document. Whether ECIR that is registered by Enforcement Directorate under PMLA. Is it a public document? Answer is no. So if I tell you one particular aspect, that FIR is a public document, but ECIR is not a public document. That's what Supreme Court has held in Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of India. It's very important. You might learn something in one law may not be applicable in another law. That's how the law evolves. But this is very important. That FIR is a public document. You can get it. ECIR, you cannot get it. Charge sheet, yes, it's a public document. You can get it. So various, depending on the law, we can always file an RTI and get the detail. So similarly, Rera Appellate Tribunal, there were no judges. The process was not started. Under RTI, we got the detail. We moved in a PIL, and fortunately, Honorable High Court directed, and the tribunal was appointed. So you can always use such RTI for the benefit of all. Now let me just show you the portal. So you see on your screen, rtionline.gov.in looks like this. You can see there is a drop-down menu called Select Ministry, then select Public Authority. So suppose you want to do it under RBI, you can do it. You can do it, let's say Ministry of Finance, Banking Division, State Bank of India, you can do it. You can put your name and address and all details. Here you can see text or RTI request application. Suppose it is not coming in this particular characters which are given. I think 300 characters are allowed. Then you can make a PDF file of your information. You can see down there supporting document, choose file. You can just upload your file and make the payment. We have to make a payment of 10 rupees. This is the portal for central government link organization. So I think I have completed. If there are any queries, I can very well take Bhavin bhai. I hope you are there.
Yeah, sir.
So Bhavin bhai, if there are any queries from the participants, I will love to take it. Otherwise, we can conclude the session.
Sir, as there is no sir query, I conclude the session, sir. I vote of thanks given. I feel privileged and honored to propose the vote of thanks on this our chartered accountant meeting. A special acknowledge to our speaker, Advocate CA Nipun Sanghvi sir, whose presentation have enriched our knowledge and provide valuable present perspective on the latest development in our field. Your expertise has been invaluable, sir. I would also like to thank all participants and attendees for their in the meeting today. Your presence have made the gathering truly meaningful and productive. A word of appreciation goes to the organized committee and support staff for their meticulous planning and flawless execution, ensuring that everything runs smoothly. Thanks. Goodbye. Have a nice day, sir. All of you.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for calling me. Thank you, Bhavin bhai, for the nice words.
Thank you all.